and even promised me that I would not croak. I guess I have no idea what it would be like to feel anything so fatuous, but I suppose it would make me happy. You know, why doesn't it make? It doesn't make them happy at all. The people who say they believe this, they can't be happy till I believe it too, and that's the cause of the constant cultural battle. So no, I don't want to. Why do I even know what they believe?
So a church which was not militant, you think, is not
not really. No, it wouldn't be the church. Well, Judaism doesn't proselytize, except among Jews. Much. It doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it also doesn't say the Messiah has already come. It has its advantages there too.
All right. Thanks. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, my question is about engagement and maybe the role for engagement. There's been a lot of discussion about free speech and advocating it and standing up for it. But I live and work in China, and often when artists or musicians, writers abroad protest China, it does make it harder for people working in the system. So I just want to see your thoughts on the balance between engagement and protest, I guess.
Well, you keep hearing, I suppose it must sometimes be true that if everyone kept quiet about a certain country or a certain state and didn't give its government the impression that foreigners were intervening and so on, that it might make life easier for the tamer sort of dissident. I mean, one is often told that. We're always told, for example, that Iranians don't welcome support for their efforts from outsiders because they can then be identified or even criminalized with. Well, that's all right, again, as long as the regime itself stays out of my life. But the Iranians won't do that. They won't let me think, oh, well, I don't care what happens in Iran. On the contrary, they say they want to export people to kill Salman, people to overthrow the democracy of Lebanon, people to blow up the Jewish community center in Buenos Aires. We know the names of the people who've been doing this in Tehran, and to have an off-the-record nuclear program. Well, I'm sorry, this is not their internal affair. And I don't know of a single human rights question, since you mentioned your domicile. Burma, Zimbabwe, Iran, well, just those three for now. You try and get anything done about those appalling, North Korea, these really appalling regimes, and you find that they're protected by a Chinese guarantee at the United Nations. And in Sudan, Darfur to Sudan, China wants to buy all their oil. It meantime gives them all their weapons. You cannot address major human rights drama in the world now without coming up against Chinese power on the wrong side. I'm sorry, this is not their internal affair.
I'd also add to that, if you look at the experience of PEN American Center, I'd say two things. Every time that PEN has supported a writer in difficulties or arrested, in whatever country, we have heard back from those writers that it was enormously valuable to them to know that their case was being seen by the rest of the world, and that they gained great strength and nourishment from the fact that their case was being highlighted. So certainly in the cases of those writers who have been on the front line, to them it has mattered a great deal that their case was given prominence. But there's another thing, which is if you look at these so-called awards that PEN gives every year to writers, which actually obviously those are writers in jail, so the award is a way of highlighting their plight. There is an enormously high percentage, which I think is somewhere around 90%, of those writers being released from jail within a 6-month period. And it is because
that's very encouraging.
Tyranny does not like publicity. It is one of the curious weaknesses of tyrants that they want to be liked. And if you could show them that they are not liked and actually that the world thinks they're assholes because of what they're doing to that writer or those writers, it's sometimes easier for them to release those writers and stop getting that kind of bad publicity. And this has been our experience in country after country for many, many years. So I would say about the publicity that on the one hand it gives strength to the good guys, and on the other hand it very often discomfits the bad guys so much that they actually change their behavior. Yes.
Yes, I was wondering if you could give specific examples of great literary novels that are now being censored. Muslim societies, I'm very sympathetic about Satanic Verses, Children of Jabalawi, God Dies by the Nile, and so forth. But is there anything right now, and if so, would it be Al-Azhar that's doing it? Is it Saudi Arabia? Is it Iran? And could you give the name of the book and the author?
Well, the most famous book that is Baudelairized in every single Muslim country is not published unexpurgated in a single Muslim country at this point is The 1001 Nights. The Arabian Nights. The Arabian Nights, the most famous book in the history of Arab literature, cannot be published uncensored in any Arab country. Why? Because it's full of naughty bits. There's a lot of sex in the Arabian Nights, and oddly, there's very little religion. God doesn't make many appearances in the Arabian Nights, but men and women having a great deal of sex make a lot of appearances. And so there it is. Only the most famous work in the history of the literature is the one being censored. Iran has to authorize the publication of novels by a board of censors every year. There have been years, I don't know if this is one of them, but there have been years recently when not a single novel has been approved for publication. So no novels have been published. No novels were deemed worthy of publication. So the censorship is at a very extreme level.
It's also, I think, partly an aspect of underdevelopment. You should look up the Arab Development Report, which was produced under the auspices of my friend Clovis Maqsood, who used to be the head of the Arab League, and a panel of other regional intellectuals and writers, on the sheer dearth of literary material, not as a result merely of censorship, but of the failure to publish or translate. Greece translates more books out of other languages and into Greek every year than the whole Arab world does in its entire language. So it's a matter of the unavailability of things, it's cultural starvation rather than singling out of a book for censorship. The only book I know about that comes straight to my mind, because I've just written the introduction to its anniversary edition, is Animal Farm, which is banned in all Muslim countries. Not just because of the pigs, who, after all, if you remember, don't come that well out of the book, but because certainly in Iran, where I've been involved in an attempt to get a pirate edition going, possibly smuggled back into Persia, it's because it's about a revolution betrayed. It's much more political.
Okay, we're out of time, so if you could please ask a quick question, and Chris will give a really quick answer that we can...
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, you mentioned Václav Havel earlier, who, as you know, was a playwright before he became the president. And I've often wondered what a government composed of writers would look like, and if art and politics necessarily has to be independent in a free society. So I was just wondering if you think that would necessarily be detrimental and what that would look like.
Salman for president. Mr. President, I have called him that when he was president of Japan. But Plato thought it would be the worst possible idea. In the Republic, he says that really would be terrible. That'd be the worst kind of tyranny you could picture. And poetry should probably be banned. What examples do we have that could be in the least bit encouraging here? Some countries have done very well by making their writers into ambassadors. Yeah. George Seferis was a brilliant ambassador.
Carlos Fuentes.
Jorge Edwards was a great diplomat.
Gallego, well, we had a near miss with Mario Vargas Llosa.
Yes.
We had Václav Havel. I'm not applying for the job.
Havel was the best. And Georgi Conrad was offered the presidency of Hungary after the collapse of communism, but the author of Anti-Politics and various other wonderful books, but he said no. I think partly because he thought the first independent president of independent Hungary should not be a Jew. A rather arcane reservation, but perhaps a good one in the circumstances.
Okay, well...
No, I think people should be elected.
I think
should run for office.
I think on behalf of PEN we have to offer a big vote of thanks to Christopher Hitchens.
My pleasure.
so eloquently stepping into the breach, and I think it now falls to me to declare this festival closed. Thank you.